Welcome back to the apple tree analogy. I'm Melissa. I'm going to start today's video with a trigger warning. I'll be briefly talking about suicide, assault, and abuse today. So if these are subjects that could be triggering to you, then please do not watch this video alone. If you are struggling with any of these issues, reach out to someone for help. I'll put links for the Suicide Prevention Hotline, the Domestic Violence Support Hotline, the National Sexual Assault Hotline, as well as the National Institute of Mental Health in the description below, so you can check those out. If I'm being completely honest, so far this is the hardest video I've ever done. I've procrastinated sharing my actual story for quite a while, but I now feel like it's the time. I have been asked why I feel like I need to share my story. Why not just, deal with it myself and move on? Why air my dirty laundry? The simple answer is that I want to share my story to help end the stigma around talking about both mental health and domestic abuse. I know that my story can help someone, even just one person, to see that they're not alone, that they can get help, that they can heal. That is why I share my story. By ending the stigma, it can help end the cycles, which, can lead to people living healthier, happier, and more fulfilling lives. Sharing my story also helps you all know that I'm not, just some crazy lady on the internet talking about something she knows nothing about. This is my life. This is what I've lived for 40 years now. Now, I'm not sharing my story to get attention or sympathy. I'm not sharing my story to shame anyone else involved, which is why I'm not including any names in my story at all. There's a lot of my story that I'm not sharing yet, some of it because legally I can't, particularly around the stuff that has to do with my kids, and some of it because I'm just not ready yet, and that's okay. For the rest of my story, I'm sitting here just wrestling, trying to figure out where to even start. I guess back at the beginning, back with my earliest memories. I don't remember much of my childhood. I think my brain, kind of blocked a lot of it out to protect me from myself, which, when I would disassociate, which I'll actually talk about a little bit in a few minutes. There are a few key events that happened in my childhood that really shaped a lot of who I became. The first was developing Bell's palsy. If you don't know what Bell's palsy is, you're not alone. The simplest way to explain it is it's paralysis of half the face. There really wasn't much known about it at the time when I was a kid and had it, but thankfully there's been a lot more research into it in the 35 years since my first experience with it. It's now understood that it's believed to be related to a viral infection that causes inflammation, in the vertebrae of the neck where the facial muscles run through. So I've had Bell's palsy twice, once as a child and once when I was pregnant with my youngest child. I had other times where I had symptoms, but was able to see a chiropractor who did some neck adjustments and was able to help me relieve the symptoms. So I never needed, further medical attention and didn't have the paralysis, which is good. Now, I don't remember much about getting Bell's palsy when I was little. My mom says it happened around the summer before I started kindergarten. What I do remember is being made fun of. I remember feeling different. I remember being treated different, by not only the kids around me, but some of the adults in my life. I don't blame them at all. I mean, how could they not treat me differently? Anyway, I developed a belief that my face was deformed, I was disfigured, I was ugly. I can't even begin to tell you how much therapy it has taken me over the years to finally be at a point where I can sit in front of a camera and share my face with you. The paralysis only lasted a short time, I think just a couple weeks, maybe. My mom says it was gone before I started school, but the mental and emotional scars it left behind lasted years. I had a doctor in my teen years, or maybe my early 20s, tell me that it was unclear if there was any genetic aspect to Bell's palsy, and there was no way of knowing, if I would pass it on to my children. That terrified me, and I was like, okay, I'm not having kids because I don't want them to have to go through it. Thankfully now it's, understood better, and there's not believed to be that, or any significant genetic aspect of the disease. But for years and years, I hated it when someone would look at my face for more than a second or two. I was so sure that they could see that Bell's palsy that I knew was hiding just beneath the surface. Bell's palsy led to what I now know was my first experience with this association. At times, I would have experiences and thoughts that seemed out of body or just not real. I felt like I was watching my life from the sidelines almost. For a long time, I actually seriously wondered if there was something wrong with me, like maybe I had some kind of mental delay and didn't know it, but everyone around me was just acting like I was normal so that I wouldn't find out. Not a lot makes sense in your brain, and your thoughts go all sorts of crazy places when you disassociate. I do want to do more videos about disassociation later, so I won't talk anymore about it here, but it is very real. Another memory I have that seems so silly now, but it stayed with me and haunted me for years. So I was in 3rd grade. We had just gotten our school pictures back. I hated that picture. I'm still not a big fan of it. We always give picture away to all of our aunts and uncles. Everyone else who saw the picture said it was adorable and that it looked just like one of my aunts, like my dad's sister. I didn't think so. I totally didn't agree. I thought it was a hideous picture. I still saw the Bell's palsy in every picture of myself, even though it wasn't there at all. I saw it. The dress I was wearing was just a little bit too tight. And the guy that cut and permed my hair, this was the 80s. I had to have my hair cut and permed. He didn't listen. I wanted my hair to sit at my shoulders and have like ringlet type perms. Yeah, he cut it to my shoulder and then did a tight spiral. Anyway, when the time came to give this particular aunt that everybody said I looked like the picture, I wanted to tell her that I didn't agree that it looked like her and that I didn't like the picture. Of course, being a kid who says stupid things, I said something along the lines of, everyone says I look just like you in this picture. I think it's ugly. I still cringe when I think about it. My aunt, made some comment about always knowing you could count on me to be honest, and it just kind of blew over, at least for everybody else. I was convinced that I had offended her to the deepest possible level and that she could never forgive me and would hate me forever. Yeah, I was a bit dramatic as a kid, and I never actually talked to her about it. It just stayed with me. But something about this incident made me feel small. It wasn't the adults around me, but rather the way I internalized it and everything else that happened for me. From that incident, I taught myself that I shouldn't speak up as much, that my opinion was wrong, that I was not valuable. I got smaller and smaller with every passing year. The 3rd event is the one that caused me the most trauma, the one I'm having the hardest time talking about. It was my cousin's accident that happened in between the Bell's palsy and the picture incident. I think I was about 6 years old. My cousin was probably around 9 months old. Our family was rebuilding the deck on the back of our house. The memories of exactly what happened, excuse me, come in waves and are sometimes a bit fuzzy, but this is what I remember. For whatever reason, my aunt, now my ex-aunt, asked me to keep an eye on my cousin who was in the kitchen in her baby walkers. You know those play seats that had wheels on the bottom so the baby could move around? They're super horribly dangerous. Yeah, one of those. So I had been playing with her in the kitchen when I realized that I had to go to the bathroom. Now, all through my childhood, I'd had lots of problems with bladder control due to what we later learned was an underdeveloped bladder. But that's its own separate trauma. Anyway, I knew that I had to go to the bathroom as soon as I could. I could still clear as if it just happened, see my little hand closing the sliding screen door that led from the kitchen to our deck. I climbed over the baby gate that kept my cousin from going out into the hallway and down the stairs, and I ran to the bathroom. And I made it. I remember being so proud of myself for not having another accident. I came out of the bathroom and went back to the kitchen to play with my cousin some more. The screen door was open and she wasn't there. I went over to the door and I saw the last wheels of her baby walker going over the edge of the deck. She was falling into the cement pit that led to our basement door. Our dog was locked up in the pit so he wouldn't run away while all the construction work was going on. I don't know if I made any noise. I do remember I turned and ran for the basement, thinking if I could get to that basement door, maybe I could catch her or something. But that's where the memories go foggy. I don't know if I ever got that basement door unlocked. I don't know if I got it open. I ran back upstairs. My dad had jumped over the railing and got my cousin out. He was doing CPR, but I couldn't understand what he was doing to her at the time. I was just too young. I know that an ambulance came and took her and my aunt and uncle away, but I don't really remember that, just that I know what happened. I remember everybody crying. My mom and my other aunts that were there were holding my sisters. I remember wanting someone to hold me. I thought it was my fault and that everyone would blame me. I thought my cousin was dead. I remember hiding in my closet for a while, but that's all I remember. I'm assuming that at some point somebody held me and comforted me, but I honestly don't remember if they did or not. Thankfully, my cousin lived. She landed on her head and has permanent brain damage. She has mobility issues with half her body. It seems like I remember someone saying that she possibly landed one side of her head on our dog, but I'm not 100% sure if that's true or if that's something I just pieced together. Anyway, a few years after that, my cousin had another accident. We were camping at a big family reunion, and my cousin wanted her baby doll that was in her little brother's playpen that was set up right near the campfire. So she pulled the chair over to the playpen to try and climb in, and ended up falling into the campfire and was burned basically all the way down the side of her body, the side that she has the mobility issues on. I watched the whole thing. I was sitting right there. Several family members grabbed her and put her under the water tap to get the fire out and to stop the burning. She was rushed to the emergency room, and thankfully her burns were tended to, and I don't know how severe they were. It seems like they weren't that severe, but all the kids were sent off to play. I knew I didn't want to go play. I wanted to be there to make sure she was okay. After they returned to camp, me being the helpful child I thought I was, I said something to my now ex-aunt along the lines of, it's really lucky that she landed on the side that she couldn't move and not the other side. I don't know how old I was, like 9, maybe 10. I don't know if I was even that old. But you say stupid stuff when you're a kid. My aunt, or ex-aunt, turned and looked me square in the eyes and said, if you had been watching her like you were supposed to, none of this would have ever happened. It's all your fault. After years of therapy, I know now that she was likely in shock. She was lashing out at a child and projecting her own failures onto me. She was also really young herself. I'm not sure how old she was, but in her mid-20s at the most. From that time on, I hated being anywhere near that aunt or cousin. It wasn't long after that my aunt and uncle got divorced, and I wasn't sad about that. I haven't really seen or talked to my cousin in years, and the thought of it still brings horrible feelings of guilt and shame. I didn't know back then, nobody knew, that I had developed PTSD from that trauma. It wasn't my trauma, it was my cousin's. So why should it have affected me so much? It was after my cousin's second accident that I thought, for the first time, that it would be better for me to be dead. That I was in the way and not wanted. I worry about sharing some of this stuff because I don't want the adults that were in my life to think that I blamed them or feel like they didn't protect me or get me help. How could they? They didn't know what I was going through, and I didn't know how to tell them. I firmly believe that most everyone does the best they can with what they have. I have worked through much of this trauma now as an adult, but I carried it for many years before I realized that this trauma had caused my PTSD. Now, when you have trauma that goes on unhealed, especially for a lot of years, and then you add more trauma over time, it can develop into complex or CPTSD, which is what happened to me. My teen years, like my childhood, are mostly a blur. My family moved from Utah to Canada when I was 14. Between the age of 12 and 17, I tried to end my life 8 different times, and I thought about it constantly. In junior high in Canada, I was assaulted by a boy in my class that accidentally grabbed and groped my breast every chance he got. The school counselor was a friend of this boy's family and said there was no way it happened, that I was lying to get attention. I don't think I ever told my parents because I thought, if the school counselor didn't believe me, nobody would believe me, so just keep it to myself. I was bullied on the school bus with kids running from one side of the bus to the other to make the bus rock as I walked, to make it seem like I was so fat that I was making the bus rock. They called me pork chop. Yeah, not funny. I was bigger than most of the kids my age, but a long way from fat, although I wouldn't have believed it at the time. I had gum put in my really long hair. I was poked, in the hind end with pencils. I had my knees kicked out as I was going down the steps of the bus, which made me fall and hit my back on the steps. This led to years of back pain, which was actually aggravated every time I got pregnant and gave birth. The bus driver, he thought it was funny, kids being kids. It was definitely one of the lowest years I ever had. I dated mostly the wrong type of guys. Although there were a couple great guys who I'm actually still friends with, one or two of them. I was verbally abused by several of my boyfriends. I had one guy tell me I was so ugly that only a blind man would ever put up with me. I don't know if he actually was legally blind or if he just said he was. Yeah. He would tell me what clothes he wanted me to wear, usually the stuff that was like super skin tight and the most revealing things that I had. This was the 90s now. But then I'd wear what he wanted, and then he would get mad at me for flaunting my body and tempting him and other men. He pushed my boundaries, and I fully believe that if I hadn't forced him to stop, he would have raped me. I dated another guy my senior year of high school, who I ended up getting engaged to at the age of 19 on New Year's Eve, year 2000. I told the guy I didn't want to propose at midnight because I thought it was too cliche and dumb. So he proposed at 11:55 p.m. Anyway, I was with him for, I think, about 3 years. I know now that neither of us was ready for marriage, and we were both really immature and had quite a toxic relationship. And thankfully we smartened up and ended things. I dated a few guys in my early 20s, not many. I actually had guys from church, this is funny, tell me that I was the type of girl they wanted to marry, but not the type of girl they wanted to date. Talk about twisted. I had shut off the idea that I would ever get married and just decided to live my life. I was, after all, 25 years old and clearly too old to be worthy of marriage at that advanced age. Then I met a guy that I kind of fell for. Looking back, it was the attention that he paid me more than anything else. My best friend, which I'll talk about her in another video, was convinced that she was going to marry him, but he didn't show any interest in her, but rather in me. I ended up letting my guard down and let him into my life just a little bit. He's a great guy, but I know we couldn't have made it work out. He ended up meeting a really great girl, and as far as I know, they're still happily married. Anyway, during the time that I was hanging out with this guy, he took me to a housewarming party, and that's where I met the man that would become the biggest monster in my life. That's where I met the man I would marry. Obviously, there's a lot more to my story that I'll talk about in future videos. But thank you so much for watching and being part of this journey. I love you all.